All right, now let's continue. We just finished looking at price elasticity of demand. Now let us look at other types of elasticity of demand. Right. So we actually saw that elasticity is just a measure of responsiveness of one factor to changes in another factor. So when we are looking at the income elasticity of demand, we are just looking at the responsiveness of demands of a good to changes in consumers' income, right? So we're looking at how is how responsive is the demand for a quantity, right, to any changes to consumers' income. So when it comes to this type of elasticity, that's income elasticity of demand, we'll look at change in the quantity demanded, percentage change in the quantity demanded over what? Over the change, percentage change in the household income, right? So basically, that's it. We'll apply the same formulas that we looked at previously, like the arc and the point, right? Where we look at the changes, right? As such, right? So let's look at let's just go back to sort of remind ourselves on the formulas there. We had this one, right? Where, right, this time around, where there's P, there will be an I representing income, right? Income now, then 2 will be the income after it has changed, right? That means 2. So that's basically how we substitute it right in that formula. So the income elasticity can take a positive or negative figure. We saw that with the price elasticity of demand, it will always take a negative figure, but we'll still disregard the negative figure. Right? We're just only looking at the absolute figure, right? So the absolute figure will start from 0 to infinity, right? Disregarding the what? Disregarding the the sign, right? The negative. So with this one, we can have either have a positive or a negative. So a good is income elastic if the income elasticity is greater than 1. So that the quantity demanded rises by a larger percentage than the rise in the income. So this item is income elastic if your answer is greater than 1. Positive or negative, but is greater than 1. So a good is inelastic if it is between 0 and 1. Right? Between 0 and 1. And lastly, it is perfectly inelastic. This is when the demand does not change. This has a coefficient of 0. So if it does not change, it is called a perfectly inelastic. Perfectly inelastic. So goods which are income elastic and income inelastic are said to be normal goods, because the demand for them will rise when the household income rises. So they have a positive elasticity. So we introduced the term normal goods, right? We said it's a nature of goods, right? Which actually the consumption of that good increases when a person's income increases. So if the good is income elastic and income inelastic, those ones are known as normal goods, and they have a positive figure, right? That means they'll have positive figure, right? That one is said to be a normal good. Well, if income elasticity is zero, right, is less than zero, then or income elasticity is negative, the commodity is said to be inferior, since the demand fall if the income rises. So we also looked at inferior goods being those the consumption decreases, right? The consumption decreases when the income increases, right? Those ones are called inferior, right? In terms of the answer that we're going to find, if we calculate, it will be less than zero. It will have a negative figure. So in this case, when it comes to income, the positive and the negative signs are very important, right? Are very important. While when it comes to price, elasticity of demand, we ignore the sign of the figure. We just assume it's what is positive, right? We're just looking at the absolute number, the number without the sign, right? So my answer could be, let's say, 0.5, right? But when it comes to price elasticity, what we're saying is it does not matter, right? We're just looking at this 0.5. While when it comes to the income elasticity, the negative just shows that it is an inferior good, right? Meaning that the income, basically what it means is that the consumption of that good is decreasing as household income is increasing, right? As an inferior good. We talked about Bonya being one of the inferior goods, right? Timangojea kuvutika. Or soya, timangojea kuvutika. So if my money is increasing, what will happen is that the consumption of Bonya will start to decrease. While when it is a normal good, we expect that when my money is increasing, now I will consume more of that. For example, let's say beef, right? If you eat once a week, we'll now be eating thrice a week because my income now has increased. That's a normal good. So that's to do with that. So let's look at the use of income elasticity of demand. So the use is that it allows firms to forecast the likely impact on sale of short-term cyclical fluctuation in income across business cycles and to anticipate the consequences of long-run economic growth and the rise in the living standards. What it means is that firms or businesses are able to actually forecast, right? Forecast is to predict, right? To predict the impact on the sales, right, of short-term cyclic fluctuation. So what happens is that cyclic fluctuations are just sort of regular fluctuation that happen during the year. For example, we would say in a span of a year, right? In a span of a year, we have January to December. So after this is how they do. Timazori January, February, sort of maybe to March. You go January, February, maka. Drama zima colors or cheaper. So it's like if it was our graph, right, of how people have income, right, we'll say January, February, income yao imakala yo cheaper. Right? Ima cheaper, pamenepa. Then ikamafika kwinako imazamba kula muna December after mranda bonus imakhandra mayambiri. So that's how basically income of individuals is actually so those are basically what cyclical fluctuation. When they just say cyclical, it's because it's basically in a circle motion, right? It means it's also January, so fluctuations are basically changes. So because people know these cyclic fluctuation, the changes in the income of individuals, they are able to forecast what is the impact on their sales, right? What is the impact on their sales? For example, if the good is a normal good, they know kuti mu December zinthu zanu zigula kwambiri, right? Because what income yawo ikhauli ndi yambiri, mabonus aja majani, so they are able to know kuti all right, it means December we are selling a lot. Or yet when they feel good, those other anthu akhalindira mazambiri sagula bonya. Everyone wants to eat nice food. So basically, that's one of the uses of income elasticity of demand, helping businesses to focus the impact on the sales in the fluctuations or changes in the income across the business cycle. And basically also looking at what are the consequences in the long run, right? In the long run, and the rising living standards, right? If people living standards are increasing, we know that they will consume less of what the inferior good, and they will actually consume more of the normal goods. So basically, if they know a country like this one, a lot of people have low income, it means inferior good will do well, right? But if they can anticipate that the living standard of most people is increasing, it means that selling an inferior good would be a bad idea in the long run. So basically, that's it. Now, that's one of the elasticities that we are supposed to look at. And the other one is the cross price elasticity of demand. In the first one, Timona price elasticity, but the price was of its own good, right? What is the change? What is basically the measure of responsiveness of demand to changes in its own price? For this one, we are looking what is the measure of demand, responsiveness of demand to change of the price in another good. So it means to go on a demand of A, right? How is the demand of A changing if the price of B has changed? Wow, yeah, price elasticity of demand. Price elasticity. What we are looking at, what is the responsiveness of demand to the changes in the price of A. So this is basically a different one. So the cross price elasticity of demand refers to the responsiveness of demand for one good to the changes in price of another good. So for this one, it sort of has this formula, right? Percentage change in the quantity of good A and percentage change in the price of good B, right? Demand imakala good A, price imakala the other, right? So given no change in the price of A. So that's the assumption. The assumption of this one is that price ya good A sina sinti. Koma ya sinti and the price ya good B. Right? So basically, that's what we are looking at. So if the two goods are substitute, we look at substitute being goods that can be consumed instead or instead of the other, right? You can replace one for the other, right? So if the two goods are, that means good A and B are substitute, for example, maize flour and cassava flour could be substitutes, right? Could be substitutes. So if these two goods are substitute, then the cross price elasticity will be greater than 0. That means answer line will be greater than 0. A fall in the price of one will reduce the demand of the other. Because mtengo wa chinthu chinacho chikangoti chatsika, right? Chinthu chinacho tengoti let's say kuna kuti panopa maize flour a bag is 50,000. Cassava flour is, let's say kuna kuti is, let's say it was 50,000 or it was 60,000. What it means, if these ones are substitutes, right? The answer immediately is will always be greater than zero. Greater than zero. Why? Because what he's saying is, akatsisa mtengo wa ichi, right? Akatsisa mtengo wa ichi, right? Demand for this one will actually drop as well. Why? Because people will flock to buying cassava, which has gone down. Akakweza mtengo wa ichi, what will happen? Demand for maize will also go up. So answer yathu inaweza ikhala positive. That's why mana kuti answer yathu ikhala more than one if it is these goods are substitutes. If the goods are complements, right? Meaning kuna kuti one good has to be used together with the other. Bread and butter, right? Bread and butter. So if the goods are complements, then the cross price elasticity will be negative. Why? Because a fall in price of one will rise the demand for the other, right? So what we're saying is bread, butter. So we have bread and butter. If butter falls, what do we expect? We expect that, okay, let's do the other way, right? Because it makes more sense, right? Let's say it's butter and bread. So if the prices of bread fall, right, we know the demand of butter will increase. So the answer is kind of negative, right? If the opposite, if the bread watan mtengo wake wakula, butter nayo so mtengo uchini wake demand yake ikipa. So you can see that they're going in different directions. Because they're going in different direction, all the time you will have a negative answer. That means it's less than zero. That is for what? Those are basically for complement. Products which are unrelated have a zero cross elasticity. So how this is related, for example, salt, probably, and sugar, those are related. We use them for different things. Gas and bread, those are, so answer that to equal 0. So we have seen kuna kuti for substitutes it's positive, greater than 0. For complements is less than 0. For goods that have 0 relation, right, then it is equal to 0. That's to do with the cross price elasticity of demand. And then lastly, we should look at the last type, and which is basically the price elasticity of supply. Now we'll be looking at supply, right? So this one just means the measure of responsiveness of the market supply to changes in the product price, to the changes in the product. So, what is the supply of the good if the product changes? So the formula also follows the same format, like the percentage change in the quantity supply over the percentage change in price. That's basically the formula there, right? That's the formula there. So just to remind each other, we know kuna kuti the supply curve is a positive, or sort of, let me call it a directly proportional. It falls like that. Directly proportion graph. Directly proportion. So basically that's it. It's directly proportion. So what means is that the answers that we can find will usually be positive. Will be positive. Because when the price is increasing, what do we expect? A lot of people what? Supplying that good. If the price is decreasing, then we'll look at less people supplying that good. It's like now the arrows go in the same direction. Because they are going in the same direction, it will cause that positive effect. So that's something that we have to know. So value, terms, and description of the price elasticity of supply. So we have a perfectly elastic. So perfectly elastic means that the demand will be changing even though the price is still the same. So it will have a value of infinity. So the demand will change even though the demand will actually change even though the price is still maintained. And in terms of the graph, it is like this. It's not different from the one that we saw in the price elasticity of demand. When it is unitary, it means that the value is 1, right? What it means is that the rate of change in the price will be equal to the rate of change in what? In the supply. That means if the price goes up by 10%, we expect that the supply of demand will also be 10%. So in terms of this one, we'll have sort of that, right? So sort of that. So sometimes it might be, if it increases by 20%, it will increase by 10%, right? It means that if it increases by 40%, this one will increase by 20%. Sort of in a sort of proportionate way, right? In a proportionate way, right? That's why with this one, we expect it to be in a straight line like this one. It just depends on the slope, right? On the slope. But what the slope means is that what it means is just the rate of change is actually different. Ngatita duse pakati kati apa, it means that they are changing in the same rate. But if ngati kupita musimo, they are different rate. It's either demand ikukwera kwambiri than price. Let's say kuna kuti a change in 10% increases 20%. That means a change in 20%, this one will be 40%. The other way, ikwina also, if iku yabanga mbali nayo, would be the opposite. Kuna kuti 20%, 10% change in price would mean 20% increase in demand or something like that. So basically, but it gives us a straight line, right? A straight line. So that one is slightly different with the one that we saw last time, where we saw now if that's the case for a unitary, it actually was like this, sort of a curve, a little bit curvy, right? That's when we are looking at price elasticity on demand. But this one is a straight line. And lastly, perfectly inelastic, that has a value of 0 and basically is a vertical line. What it actually means is that the price can change, but the supply will be constant, right? The supply will be constant. So basically that's it. And when it is elastic supply, this prevails when a small change in price causes a greater change in the supplied quantity. In this case, elasticity of supply is greater than 1. So where we are saying that the thing is elastic, that means the answer that we're going to find is always going to be greater than 1. Greater than 1. What it means is that a small change in its price will cause a greater change in the demand. Will cause a greater change in the supply, right? The quantity supplied. Well, when it is inelastic, the answer is less than 1. What it means that a small change, or let me say a change a smaller change in the price will actually cause the supply to actually also change pang'ono, or a bigger change will even cause supply kuti isente pang'ono. In other words, it responds less. It actually responds less. So basically, those are the items that we had to know. We had perfect elastic, unitary elastic, price elastic, then we have elastic, then inelastic. So let us look at determinants of price elasticity of supply. In other words, factors that affect the price elasticity of supply. So there are a number of items that we have to be aware of. The first one is the excess or spare capacity. Do we have excess capacity, or do we do not have excess capacity or spare capacity? So if there is spare capacity, then supplier will be able to respond quickly to increase in the price. Therefore, supply will be elastic. If the producer are operating at or near full capacity, supply will be elastic, at least until the capacity can be varied. So basically, what it means is that what we have to look at is are people having spare capacity? Spare capacity. What it means is that tadusa nthawi ya chimanga koma alimi adakali ndi chimanga, because if the prices are going to increase, what will happen is that anthu akapeza takagwisa chimanga chawo, anthu akakhala akafakana ndi spare capacity. Koma ngati alibe spare capacity, what will happen? It means that sangathe kupanga increase. They'll supply whatever they will supply, or other people will not jump in for that opportunity, right? So the question is, do the suppliers have spare capacity? If they have spare capacity, then it will be elastic, right? That means a change in that will cause a greater change in the other, right? In the supply. But if people are operating near full capacity, right? It means they do not have a spare capacity. It means that they cannot supply more, right? They cannot supply more. That's basically it. So the first thing is that do suppliers have spare capacity? Other thing that would affect the price elasticity is the number of suppliers, right? So the more the number of suppliers in the market, the more elastic the supply will be. So if there are a lot of players in the market, then it means that when there is a change in the price, a lot of people will supply that item, right? So it depends on the number of suppliers. If there are less people, it means that it will be inelastic. Where will people come from to supply, right? So basically that's it. If in Malawi have little farmers, even if in Dengwaji Mangurakwira, there will not be more maize on the market. Why? Because there were few suppliers of that item. So that one would also depend. If there are a number of people, then it will be elastic. If there are few suppliers, then it will not be elastic. And the other thing is the time it takes to increase capacity, right? So time it takes to increase capacity. So how long does it take for you to increase capacity? So in certain industry, expansion takes a longer time. Once such industries are operating full capacity, their supply will be inelastic. So how long does it take for you to increase capacity? For example, I'm doing something. For example, I'm supplying, let's say, I don't know what industry could be, but let's say it's a particular product that I'm supplying. Right? It will take me a long time for me to set up, increase my production of that good, right? For example, if it is maize, maize inamba kutani kuchipa, kudula. What would happen? It would be easier for me to what? To just kupanga rent out farm, kulima chaka cha mawa. So how long does it take for you to increase your capacity? Right? How long does it take for you to increase your capacity? Right? So basically that's to do with the time it takes for you to If it takes you fewer time, that means expansion will be easier and will be elastic. While if it takes you longer time, it means that it will be inelastic. And lastly, the availability to store product. So can you be able to have storage space to store your product, right? So supply will be elastic if the product can be stored. That's why people can keep their maize in stock, right? It means that if prices increase, you'll see a lot of people now actually what? Actually selling that product. Why? Because they were able to store. But if that product can't be stored, it means that they cannot, it will be inelastic, right? For example, let's say it's meaty, right? It's gonna get spoiled. Or tomato, right? That's why tomato in a carton, right? So it's tomato, right? You can't store tomato unless you put it in the fridge, which yeah, or jars. But let me just say, the actual tomato, right? Tomatoes cannot be stored; they are perishable. What it means is that utengo zakakwera nthani ake ngakhale umapeza kuti nkani umapeza kuti nthani yake tomato akusowa koma mtengo ukukula kwambiri koma because tomato yakusowa it couldn't be stored amapeza kuti what happens it's mapeza kuti you end up with zinthu zoti like kuna kuti supply simakhabe yambiri fact tomato uja so koma if it was possible to store it that means bweza anthu akusunga nomadikira nthawi imene imadwa ija ndopeza kuti pasika paja upeza kuti tomato alipobeya kwambiri. So basically those are factors that affect the price elasticity, and that was the last type of elasticity. So we saw price elasticity of demand, then we saw supply elasticity of demand, then price elasticity of supply. Then we looked at the income elasticity of demand and cross price elasticity of demand. So that's where we stop. Thank you.